Lusamine is a tragic Pokemon character with incredibly flawed views on what love truly is. She's a mother to Lillie and Gladion, and she runs the Aether Foundation, a sanctuary for hurt and abandoned Pokemon. On paper, she's everything. Warm, caring, beautiful, what's not to like? But her son ran away from her, and her daughter was so afraid of her that she could barely function. That gap between what someone looks like and who they actually are is a story that we constantly see in the real world. How does someone who genuinely loves their children become the worst thing that ever happened to them? And why is it that the people who hurt us are so often just people who were hurt themselves? When the player meets Lusamine, she greets them warmly and tells them that she wants to be a mother to all Pokemon, even creatures from other dimensions such as the Ultra Beasts. Which, wow, talk about inclusivity. That's a green flag if I've ever seen one. Even when Ultra Beasts do appear, she feels as if they're suffering and that she doesn't want to see them suffer, and so she talks about wanting to save it and love it. This is obviously the game's portraying her to be someone that the audience can and should get moved by, but unfortunately for the games, during the promotional run itself, people were speculating Lusamine to be the villain of the game based on her artwork alone. And the game didn't really try to hide Lusamine's weird evil smiles or the corruption with the Aether Foundation at the beginning of the game, but honestly, it didn't need to. I think the point of Lusamine being a villain wasn't to show or have a crazy plot twist reveal like the way they did with Volo or anything, but it was more so to show that good intentions could very much lead to bad results. That good intentions could destroy the people and world around you, if not handled properly, of course. For those of you who have never played the game, you may be wondering what I'm going on about. Well, when we jump to the climax of the game, we see what Lusamine's definition of love really is. It's possession. Something that unfortunately many parents and just people in general associate with love. But it's honestly the furthest thing away from love. In a hidden room in the Aether Paradise, we find out that Lusamine is freezing and preserving Pokemon in cases. She's keeping them exactly the way she wants them. She calls them her precious babies and says that they'll be protected for eternity. This is a visible showcase of her quote-unquote love, but it doesn't just apply to these frozen Pokemon, but it again applies to everything and everyone in her life, including her children. And this is most notable with Lillie. Gladion is the first of the two siblings to leave and run away from Lusamine, but Lillie is the first one we're introduced to within the games. When we first find her, she's this helpless girl who struggles to help Cosmog from a few Spearow attacking it, who can't even cross a bridge herself. She's incredibly shy and timid and completely unaware of basic things in the world. On top of that, she's always acting apologetic for things that don't require apology, for taking up space and taking up time. She hesitates before every act, and over time, we learn where it comes from. It's her childhood, her upbringing. It's hard to say whether this is because she genuinely didn't know what to do because of lack of exposure, or because she had dealt with consequences or punishments for acting on her own, acting in her own way outside of how Lusamine would have liked her to act. And so she became crippled or paralyzed in acting on her own. I'm almost willing to bet that it's the latter here because the dialogue points closer towards this. When you enter Lusamine's room, you get to see a conversation between Lillie and Lusamine, where Lusamine is being incredibly condescending towards Lillie. She basically says that Lillie doesn't have any strength, that all that she's ever done on her own is steal someone else's research material, referring to her stealing Cosmog, an innocent Pokemon that Lusamine and Aether were messing with, and telling her that she isn't beautiful enough for her world. Even when pleading not to bring the Ultra Beast here into the world, Lusamine says that it's probably gonna die, but she doesn't care because she wants to use its power, and that she may have listened to Lillie if she had really been a daughter to her, but she hasn't been. And what does Lusamine mean by that? She means that Lillie hasn't listened to and obeyed every word and every expectation that she's been given. And this is further proved by Lusamine's dialogue, just like how your enjoyment of this video is being proven by you hitting that subscribe button. But yeah, when Lusamine goes psycho and enters Ultra Space, she talks about being happy in Ultra Space because it's just her and everything that she deems beautiful. A true paradise that's filled only with the things that she loves and nothing more. That if something is not beautiful, it's not worthy of her love, and thus she doesn't need it. She then brings up how Lillie used to be beautiful to her for some time, back when Lillie was little and would listen to everything she said without question. And now that she's changed and started to forge her own path and defy her own mother, she's now become ugly. Gladion gets the same treatment in a slightly different way. We don't actually know too much of whether Gladion was obedient obedient the way Lillie was when they were younger. Game evidence doesn't provide too much about his younger days, but from what we know about the anime, he definitely listened to his mother and dressed the way she wanted him to and everything. And regardless of what, it's clear that with his edgelord personality that he went through a major rebellious phase at this point in the game. Gladion, being older than Lillie, likely caught onto Lusamine's ways way earlier, and decided to leave much earlier as well. Based on Lusamine's dialogue, we also know that Gladion stole Type Null, a replica of God, or Arceus, created by Lusamine and the Aether Foundation. How's that for perfect, huh? But yeah, this is similar to how Lillie stole Cosmog, so I guess it runs in the family. Lusamine comments about him being untidy, which is probably just a snarky comment in regards to his choice in style. But Gladion comes off a lot more colder and ruthless in comparison to Lillie. Actually, it's kinda similar to the way that Lusamine operates. Again, in the anime, the kid looked like he was really warm and sweet when he was younger, but probably when he had to run from home or run away from Lusamine's grasp, he naturally had to close himself off and make himself less vulnerable, making him appear to be very cold. Because the moment the story resolves with Lusamine and Lillie, Gladion is suddenly much warmer. He expresses his thanks and seems like a much more friendly person altogether. And because of this, I think Gladion actually gives a good look at what Lusamine was like before her own trauma. You see, while I'm not justifying it under any means, typically when parents try to possess or control their child, it usually comes from some kind of trauma of their own. Their fears and pains are mistaken as means of protection, and in Lusamine's case, her possession comes from her fear of loss, because she ended up losing her husband, Lillie and Gladion's father, Mon. During their research of the Ultra Beast, it seems that he suddenly was taken in by one of the Ultra Wormholes. But prior to this incident, Lusamine is said to actually have been a kind and considerate mother. Lillie even makes mention of how when she was much younger, Lillie went to go out to play in the rain alone, and when Lusamine came to bring her back in, instead of scolding her, she stayed and danced in the rain with her. They both fell sick, but Lusamine held her daughter as she recovered. But after the loss of Mon, she took her fears to an extreme where she didn't want to lose anyone or anything ever again, and thus, preservation became what was most important to her. Possession was what became most important to her, and what she mistaken to be love. But if you don't let a seed break its shell, it will never bloom into a flower. And the same goes for people in their growth when you hold them too tight. Lillie exemplifies this as, with the time being away from Lusamine's grasp, she also begins to embrace her own vulnerability with excitement and courage, rather than fear, and even stands against her mother and helps her snap back to her senses. And when she does, Lusamine finally lets go of this idea that everything has to go her way. Because in the end, though Lillie is everything Lusamine didn't want her to be, she still calls her daughter beautiful. And really, I think this is what makes Sun and Moon so strong. I've always preferred Pokemon Sun and Moon to Ultra Sun and Moon. Though I know gameplay wise, the Ultra games are stronger and have much more content, Sun and Moon has a much more compelling story because it takes Lusamine to a certain extreme that's retconned in the Ultra games. But the kids don't neglect their mother for it. They see her for who she is, both the good and the bad, and help her work through it. They don't write her off, they don't cling to her, but they stick through for the people that they love and the people that took care of them. And that's what makes it so strong. They had every reason to take what Lusamine dished out to them and make their lives a living hell, but they chose not only to work through it, but help each other heal in the process. And Lusamine really does heal, because the one good thing about the Ultra games that adds to Lusamine's story here is that in the post game, we find out that Mon is alive, but without his memories. Lusamine, realizing that he's doing well for himself, doesn't try to hold him too tight as she once would have. Instead, she's happy for him and lets him live out his new life. It's bittersweet and even surprises Gladion, but in the end, it's a demonstration of her growth and a huge tell that she was never a bad person, or even a good person for that matter. She was just a person who was flawed and hurting, who did real damage, but was still capable of change. And once she had the help to work through it, she was able to share her actual love with her own family and the world. I know there are many people out there who probably feel vindicated by their own parents or families or friends or just other people in their lives. You might be one of them who feels this way, and you shouldn't forget what's happened, but you certainly have the power to learn and move on from it. Maybe there's even a way to grow from the experience and help the other person out who's obviously hurting, because only hurt people hurt other people. And in the modern age, I think people are very quick to cut others off when they feel as if they're not worth someone's time, or when they think the other person's no good. But I think the strongest relationships out there in any regard are the ones who can overcome their struggles together. Pokemon may be a kid's game, but but I think there's genuinely a lot to learn from the story of Sun and Moon and Lusamine and her family. And to this day, this whole arc is what makes Sun and Moon one of my favorite Pokemon games. Thanks for watching, be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and thanks to all my members for supporting me on the channel. I'll catch you guys over on the next video.